So, thank you all for being here. Want to just prep you, we're about to have one of the greatest defensive players in the NFL ever. So without any further ado, I'm gonna play a little intro for the man. Welcome, everybody, and welcome Malcolm Jenkins. Again, Aaron Bass, glad to be here and be your host for the evening. Malcolm Jenkins just had his book released this week, so shout out to you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Getting that out for everywhere. Let's dig into your book. So, want to talk about your history in the NFL, want to talk about some experiences you've had and your personal experiences you wrote about in the book. You've had 2 Super Bowl championships. You've had multiple championships and success in high school and in college.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to college?
The Ohio State University.
The Ohio State. So, which championship was the most meaningful to you?
The last one for me was obviously here in Philadelphia. I think for many reasons, I think the story of that season was just one that was special to me, and being a captain of it, being at the, steering that ship to kind of come home and to see now just the lasting effects of that game and that season on the city is definitely something I hold near and dear. For sure.
Love it. All right. You talk about motivation. So your book is called What Winners Won't Tell You, and you go into motivation. What motivates you? What motivates you as a player? And then we'll get later on at what motivates you now in life.
Yeah, I think motivation is a moving target. I think early on in the book, you'll see that I was motivated just by the sheer desire to compete. And just, I see anybody on the field and I'm like, I think I can beat them. And if that's what I love to do. But eventually, you realize, okay, you get to another height and competition isn't enough. And then it started becoming, well, I want to be the best. And okay, so you start chasing that, and then you become the best, and then you say, okay, well, what's next? Mm-hmm. And I think at the end of my career, it got to the point where I was just like, I just want to have fun. Yeah. I just want to have fun with the game, and I enjoyed probably the last few years of my career more than I did, playing when I was a kid. And so for me, that motivation is changed now because I'm not in the arena. Mm-hmm. It's my motivation now is to do things that scare me. Because football is the only thing that I've done where it's like every week I'm nervous about playing a game. I'm very aware, I talk about fear a lot in the book. I'm very aware that there's injury, that there's 100,000 people watching my, every move. Like that, being able to perform in that chaos is scary, but afterwards you feel so much stronger about yourself. You know that you can take on, anything. And I think now it's hard to replicate those things until writing this book. It was like the first time I got nervous since probably the Super Bowl, because all of a sudden now you're stretching yourself from doing things that, are uncomfortable, going to places I haven't been. And that, for me is motivating.
So tell me, why did you write this book? Why did you do something scary like that?
Well, at first, I kind of saw the light at the end of the tunnel in my career. It just got to a point where I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna go through another training camp. I don't think I'm gonna do it. So I should probably, so that made me reflect on my career a lot. And so while I was still playing, I just started to figure out how to tell a story. And I'm like, all right, if I tell my story, it's got to be a good story. What do good stories consist of? Good stories take you on an emotional roller coaster. It might make you cry, might make you cheer, might make you feel low, make you feel anxious, but, eventually kind of, it makes you feel a bunch of things. And I'm like, but as an athlete, you really only feel like we're used to showing people the best, the strongest of us. We score a touchdown, everybody, screams. We hit somebody, everybody thinks you're strong. We don't really get to show you the other side of that. And so to tell a good story, I had to make sure that I showed kind of both sides, not just what happens on Sunday, but what happens, Monday through Saturday. And really, even for the person who's not a fan of football, there's still a purpose for my story. And so I try to talk about how intellectual the game is, because most of the time we talk about the physical body, being physically strong. But I was always a fan of the intellectuals in the game and how the game is like chess and how so many of the lessons that I've learned in the game and these split-second decisions apply to life. And so, yeah, I'm sure we're going to unpack some of that as we go. But that was really the motivation, was how do I contextualize my 13-year career and leave kind of, my own story in my own words.
So one of the things you said about motivation, I love this quote, but my career and my success have been meticulously and painstakingly welded together through the heat and pressure of competition and the feverish pursuit of obtaining the respect of every opponent I faced. Your foreword starts with Tom Brady. Tell me about the respect you have for Tom Brady and also the respect that he has for you, as he writes in your book.
Yeah, at one point in time, Tom Brady was, when he retired, I didn't realize that he was one of my motivations. Because he retired and I was like, damn, what am I supposed to do now? Who was going to be, because he was over at Tampa, I was in New Orleans. But I think when I came up with the title, and you put legendary defender in there, we're trying to figure out who writes the foreword of that. And it's like, well, who better to call you a defender than the person, you play against, one of your opponents. Tom Brady's obviously like the opponent I have the most respect for. And I've spent the last few years trolling Tom about the Super Bowl, so I didn't think he would take me up on it, honestly. But I reached out to him and he obliged. And I think it's just, I appreciated his foreword because it was more about me as a man than it was about me as the player. And I think that was something I always wanted to seize. And when I talk about like my drive was, I wanted people to respect me, obviously on the field for what I do, but just as a man in my totality. So to see somebody like Tom Brady recognize that was definitely satisfying.
Let's get into your growing up in Piscataway, New Jersey. You are Malcolm, the brother of Martin and Miles. So we'll get into Miles too. But tell me, what were your parents thinking when they named a Malcolm and a Martin in your family?
Yeah, out of all of the civil rights icons, Malcolm X was my mother's favorite. So I became Malcolm. Mm-hmm. Next on that list was Martin Luther King, so Martin. And then I grew up in a house with music around Miles Davis, obviously, but instead of it being, instead of the I, they put a Y just to change it up a little bit. But yeah, Miles Davis, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X.
So what was it like growing up? You had a mom, a dad, and a grandmother that were huge and just instrumental in your life. How did that set you apart from your peers in New Jersey where you grew up?
Well, honestly, I didn't really even get to paint the picture of like what my childhood looks like or looked like. I came from like a village. So we grew up in really East Orange, New Jersey, which is right around Newark. So we had a big family. My parents were both working at a time. They had to be in their young 20s. They both got full-time jobs. So I'd be at my aunt's house, my grandma's house. At one point, I felt like my whole family lived in one space. And then eventually we moved out to Piscataway, which is a little bit more of a suburb. But even then, we relied heavily on my grandfather and my grandmother. I talk more about my grandmother because the lessons that she gave seemed to just last a little bit longer. But yeah.
So we're going to dig into your grandma, but also going to dig into Calvin.
Yeah.
So who is Calvin in your book?
So I talk about Calvin as he's my best friend growing up. We start off playing football, and I'm always like, I'm astounded just by his fear. I was a kid who didn't like contact. Like, football hurts, and I'm like, I'm not going to act like it doesn't hurt. But he was one of those people who, always stepped to it, who didn't blink before he hit somebody, who always like sought contact. And he and I became best friends as we grew up. He got into gang life. He was a Crip. And just through osmosis, being around, the obvious thing is, well, you might as well get down too. But that didn't come from him. It came from just the group. And I consulted him one day, just jokingly, and in his face, I'm like laughing, like, man, they said I might as well get down. And he like looked at me like, nah, you got too much going on. You got all your things in order. You just need to stay focused and keep doing what you're doing. Which was confusing to me at the time because he also had a scholarship to go to like a D2 school at the time. We both were doing the same thing. It's like, why don't you see that for yourself? And I didn't really see what was going on kind of in his world. But he created distance between he and I, so I basically, with my best friend kind of stiff-arming me away from that life, my focus goes back to sports and football. And obviously our two tails kind of splitted that road, but comes back later in life when, we catch up. He's helping me with my football camps back at home, and I come to find out now he's helping men and women who've been incarcerated get jobs. And he's like rising the ranks, is actually really good at it. And so I laughed as I was writing this book because I held a lot of guilt about our different paths. Like he was probably the best example of a friend that I've ever had. And I always wondered why I couldn't be that friend for him. But understanding kind of now in hindsight from way up, he was just exercising his gift like way back then, deterring people from bad decisions, keeping them on the road that they need to be in. And so it's kind of funny how life ties those loops. But yeah, I put it in the book also to just showcase that was a motivation of like a lot of my social justice work and why I was specifically with men and women who were incarcerated, because people like to hold me as like the standard. I'm like, I was one decision away from being in the same shoes. And so there's a need for, second chances to understand that people are on a journey. It's called an evolution for a reason. So yeah, that's why he's a huge part of this book. And I was excited to even, he's excited that he now lives in this story. And so you immortalize that as well.
That's amazing. And I love the fact that no matter what you've done in your life, you can still look back at some of the conversations like with Calvin, because too often it is easy to feel like I was always going to be destined to be successful. But truth is just one decision away. Had you made a different decision on one day, we might not be having this conversation with you right now. So this deals with your social justice. Tell me, you are focused on incarcerated and youth, and you're also focused on police brutality. Why?
Well, I mean, those are the obvious ones. Like when you look around and you just say, what affects us, more boldly, I think all of us get shocked when we see, or traumatized when we see a Black person get shot by the police. That automatically draws, a shock value. But the more you learn, the more you kind of get upset when you start to look at the incarceration rates and who's incarcerated for how long and for what. And then you start to, pull those strings, and you realize the web just gets, bigger and bigger. And so really those just were the entry points. But as we got into social justice, it becomes like there is no one issue or one lane. It's you're kind of just going to the best available, option, which has the most momentum today. Because unfortunately, when we talk about issues that affect Black people specifically, it's not like it has the limelight all the time. So it's that when the police brutality stuff is at the forefront, okay, that's when we can make movement. But then we have a pandemic and other things change, or we have an election and our attention turns there, but then we wait for something else to happen and push. And so as an athlete, it's really just, I found that my position is how to keep the light on some of the issues as much as possible, knowing that light comes to us, attention comes to us. So, okay, with that, let's pull voices from the community. Let's pull these issues to the forefront. But even, as an athlete, you're a victim to that kind of ebb and flow.
So what are some of the barriers that you encountered dealing with social justice?
The encounter,
the barriers you encountered. So you are in the NFL, and Colin Kaepernick is kneeling. Donald Trump is president, and you are inserting yourself.
I didn't see those as barriers because I got through all of them. My bad. I was confused. No, there's definitely. I think there were struggles. Obviously, you expect. If you step out against the NFL on a stage like this, national anthem with the flag, you expect there to be backlash. That wasn't a problem. I didn't really anticipate how hard organizing would be. And then that's why I had a level of respect for community organizers and real activists. Especially a group of, alpha males who all have opinions and backgrounds and all these things. And so it became a thing where you're, trying to present a united front, but everything behind the scenes is kind of chaos. But that's also like, hey, that was part of the moment. You can't get it perfect. We're full-time football players trying to figure this stuff out. Guys are on the West Coast and East Coast meeting every night, talking about how we can do it. And so, most of the time you try to put your feelings kind of to the ground and stay focused on what was going, what we were trying to accomplish. And some people fractured, some didn't. And I think it made me think a lot about Anquan Bolden, because I could remember being called like a sellout and all these things was happening. And I'm like, bro, we gotta say something. This is getting crazy. He's like, man, I don't care what the fuck they saying, man. I'm like, yeah, but we need to say something, bro. This is getting crazy. He's like, I don't care what they saying. We didn't come here to get nobody a job. We didn't come here to look good. We came here to change something. And I realized like his poise, settled me down. I'm like, you're right. Let's stay focused. But his drive was more than just the protests and all this stuff. His cousin had actually been killed by an off-duty police officer. And he quit football to go make sure that he got justice for his cousin, which he did. And so he was driven by and focused on what we all had started, which is about the people, about changing stuff. And then, and so for me, that was always like the settling moment. So when you ask okay, the strife or barriers, it really wasn't too much of a deterrence. It was just more distractions. How do you, in life, get past all the BS and focus on the things that actually matter?
So let's get into the BS then. The media portrayed the protests. Well, actually, tell me, how did the media get different protests and what you were doing wrong with regards to the flag and you were disrespecting service members?
I mean, I don't think that's a real narrative.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about that in your book. So let's talk about how is that it was misinterpreted.
No, it wasn't misinterpreted. It wasn't misinterpreted. I think we just have to understand what the media does. Nobody turns on the TV if they just say, no big deal, this is not a big deal. It's like the media was what we wanted. So taking a knee or doing something during the national anthem, let's not get it construed. We know that is triggering. It should be. That's the reason we're doing it. So the criticism, of course, is going to come. That's just natural politics. But the issue is when you heard Colin Kaepernick say this is about police brutality, it's about the injustices that we have, the inequities we have. Okay, then you have to pay attention to that. That's where the media decided, okay, we're going to ignore that. We don't see those clips. But we'll highlight he had on these pig socks, or we'll highlight that we'll just show him taking a knee over and over and over and over and over again and let people debate. It's not really news. And so I think you had a lot of that even, in the sports world where they would be behind the players, but they would continue the narrative that this is what we're fighting against. So now even the fans are thinking that they need to come defend us. And I'm like, no, I don't need you to defend me. I'm good. I'm here trying to fight for the people. Let's do that. That's what the focus should be. And so it wasn't just that the media were changing, were attacking the protest. They were confusing everybody. Because instead of us saying, okay, let's focus on police brutality, it became, well, okay, the media just drops some bait in, and then it's like, well, that's not American. And now all of our supporters got distracted from the cause and says, well, no, it is American. And now y'all are arguing over here, and the real issue is back over this way. And that was the most frustrating part. And because even with ourselves as athletes, we were buying into that stuff too, which is why later as I matured, you see me raise these cards that say, you're not listening. And I don't say anything in an interview, is because I realized that was a trap. Like, constantly trying to fight everything that somebody says is ridiculous. Okay, y'all can read, so let's just do this. And I think, it's not really about like being the loudest all the time. It's just about disruption, And so if you're in a loud room, usually silence, it is really loud. If this room is in chaos and one person is over there sitting, legs crossed, chilling, that stands out. So, it's just about strategy, like anything else. I talk about trying to tackle LeGarrette Blount, and it went terribly wrong. And it's because he's bigger than me, and I tried to hit a guy bigger than me. When it's like, you should probably use strategy. And I think that's just the discernment that it takes to really be effective when you're trying to take on things that are bigger than you.
What was the outcome? So you talk in the book, and we watched you publicly. Your fist in the air ends. Why? What was the outcome that you would achieve?
Yeah, the outcome is you start to realize that one, the momentum you had is dwindling. The amount of players that are participating in the protest is shrinking by the week. Guys are now coming out of the league, and you realize that you are not here. The NFL was never the problem. The NFL is not the cause of racism. It is not the solution to racism. They, like any other corporation, can do way better. And so I always looked at them as a tool. If we can get some money out of them and control the money, why not? And especially if we don't have to stop doing anything. And so for me, once we got to the point where we all negotiated a deal, we felt like, okay, we know money's going to this group, and then the rest of it is going to help us form an organization where we can now operate on our own outside of the league. Oh yeah, that's never been done before by athletes. I see that vision, and so that decision became very easy. So when they fractured, and people forget, I was the only one at the microphone because Anquan Bolden retired to do the work, so he didn't have to do a interview 3 times a week at his locker. I'm stuck having to be the press secretary and give the day-to-day, and which is cool. That was my role. But it wasn't ever just a decision by me. We had a collective that, talked and was dedicated to this. And none of this gets done kind of without that collective group. And so we talk about in the book the frustrations of trying to organize, the tactics that we actually use to get the NFL to eventually give up that money. And then what that set the ground for to come. When you look at the NBA and the deal they did when they had the bubble, that deal was structured based off of the stuff that we did. We grew from 12 players to 12 sports leagues having their own player coalitions under us. And so it's like these seeds that we were planting were into some tough and dry soil, but here we are now 7 years later, and that is still producing fruit, still growing and getting bigger. And so it's one of those things that I'm now like happy that I had people like Anquan next to me that could just stay focused in the storm and knew what we were trying to get done, and had the vision and guts to stand strong.
And just to shout you out, the number he's talking about isn't little money. It was $89 million you were to secure, that's a big deal for in social movement. During your time in the NFL, playing as well as dealing with the time of protests and social justice, you go into self-talk all throughout the different chapters of your book. So there's self-talk when you miss a play. There's self-talk about you say, I suck. You say, my friends, my peers, other players think I'm bad. And then everyone around, all the public thinks I'm bad. There's the self-talk. During social justice, you get into the negative self-talk. Tell me, how do you deal with the negative self-talk?
With positive self-talk, it's a daily battle for me. Like But once I realized it, I had to like change it. I had to change the way that I talk to myself in order to like see something different. So, I'm going through a rough part of my career. I'm rated the worst safety in the league 2 years in a row, basically. The Saints I was drafted to kicked me out the door without even saying goodbye. And, that's all messing with my psyche. And I had I came off in 2012, the Saints defense was the worst defense in the history of football. And my name is on that. But luckily I got a couple of Super Bowls to balance that out. But I was really like tough on myself. And so it was good in one way. Like when I came here, I didn't mind the fans being rough and booing, because I'm like, y'all are no worse than me or myself. I'm like, we do suck. I'm booing too. But but I had to figure out how to come out of that, especially with the more things that I put on my plate. The bigger the bandwidth, the more anxiety I would have. And you start to realize that a lot of the times that voice is just worry about the future or the past. And what I had to learn to do was always put myself in the present moment. So I had these tricks. I'd be knocking on my helmet twice, or I'd be going through a thought cycle practice. And going through therapy really taught me these tools. So now, I can stand, with things going crazy. It doesn't mean I don't have anxiety or fears. I just have the tools now to navigate it. I know how to protect myself. I know how to get myself from going, spiraling. And a lot of the times people don't have those tools. So, because, a lot of people are reading the book now and they're like, hey, I wish I talked to you more. Because I talk about thinking about suicide and wanting to drive my car off the road because my anxiety was too high. And I'm like, well, they're like, I can tell that it's like they don't check on a strong friend, right? Like, man, you look like you were always poised, like you always had it under control. And it's like, that's what it looks like if somebody's under a bench press. They usually look like they got control until they don't, right? That's what a spotter's there for. And so I think this book, hopefully shows us, one, to be a little bit more concerned, especially about our strong friends. But also, on the other end of it, sometimes you don't have a spotter and you're going to have to figure out how to make it. And I had to navigate that. So all of that's kind of in there. And that came more from just life, too. It wasn't just football or the social justice things. My marriage was struggling. I got all of the pressures of my family and community on me. Those are things that all of us can deal with. We got jobs and things we need to perform at. It's only 24 hours in a day. We got dreams that we want to pursue, other things that we want to do with our time. And we struggle to navigate that. And so hopefully my story, one, shrinks that gap between you and I, and just realize that, hey, players are going through the same type of life cycles, and here's how we navigate them.
Thank you. That's huge. What's interesting about when you're in the car and you're driving and contemplating even taking your own life, I was blown away. That was in the 2017 Super Bowl run for the Eagles. And a lot of the pieces in your book, there are themes that are about decisions and moments. And so there's Calvin with the Crips and the decision that you go, I'm not going to join the Crips. There's a decision you make not to harm yourself in the car. And that would have derailed everything for you, for your family, for your daughters, as well as the work that you were doing, and for social justice. And so I think you're right. It is difficult to look at somebody who is being as successful as you are and being as strong as you are. And then I was even more proud that you asked for help. And so in the book, you do seek mental health, because a lot of times, especially for Black men, it is, I'm gonna do this on my own. And I might be I don't need a spot. I'll take 1,000 pounds and I might harm myself because I don't want you to feel like I'm not strong enough. So what is the mental state that you believe somebody has to be in to then ask for help? How do you push somebody to go, this is your lowest, and you can't do it on your own? Yeah, so
I'll connect these two stories that are in the book. The reason that story really resonates, or why I kind of choose to get help, is because I played a game against the Cowboys. It was 2015. And they hand it to Darren McFadden in the middle. I come up and catch him in the hole, big hit. And I remember kind of like feeling weird. I dropped to my knees, but I still made the tackle. And the drive's over, I get to the sideline, and we're sitting there drinking water, and it's a TV timeout, so I'm looking at the big screen up there in Dallas Stadium, and then I see Cole Beasley catch a touchdown pass, and I'm like, damn, when did he do that? And I'm like, I can't see who's covering him yet because the DB hadn't come into focus, and then it did, and it was me, and I didn't remember it, and I was like, when did Cole Beasley score a touchdown on me? And Rodney McLeod just looked at me like, what? And so I hit it. I just got up and walked down the sideline just to collect my thoughts because I really couldn't remember it, and it kind of scared me, but it was an important game. I felt like we needed to win it, and I knew how important I was to the defense. But I talk about trying to play through a concussion and how trying to cover Cole Beasley with a concussion is like trying to cover Sonic the Hedgehog. But I hit it the whole game. Luckily, I didn't re-injure myself. But after the game, I immediately went to the trainers, told them. And the next day, I had to deal with the coaches and players. Now they know the news. They knew what happened. And I remember the defensive coordinator, Bill Davis, he caught me in the meeting room with just he and I. And he was almost about to cry. And he's just like, if I would have knew that you were hurt at all, I would never have put you in the game. Because I don't care if it was a Super Bowl. It's like you're too important, not just to the team, but just your family, who you are. And it's one of those things that, like, in football, we talk about, the two best qualities of any player is not their talent or their ability, can you be available and accountable? Can you do your job, and are you going to be available to do your job? Which means that, like, injuries, that's why injuries are a big part. It's a game of attrition. You got to be healthy, and your talent is nothing if you're in a training room. And that was one of those things, like, you can hurt yourself and not take care of yourself if you want to, but then you're of no use not only to yourself, but to your family, to your community. And at a moment in which I was trying to be strong, I realized that the only way to be strong in that moment was to ask for help.
Appreciate that. In your book, I was impressed that you got yelled at for playing through a concussion. And maybe about 15 years earlier, you might have gotten yelled at for not going back out there. And so the NFL shifted a lot where concussions are a real thing and impacting people. You, before games, during the national anthem, you prayed to your ancestors. So who are you praying to and what are you saying?
So one of the things I started doing when I got to Philly, my first 5 years in the league, I was so caught up in the games. I was always worried before games. So, I would get into the stadium and try to ignore the stadium and just try to be focused on the field. I wouldn't look in the stands. I wouldn't wave to my family and stuff like that. I was always locked in. And then, that didn't really get me anywhere. I ended up on the street. And so I'm like, all right, this time around, I signed a 2-year deal. This kind of a prove it deal. If I don't prove it in the next 2 years, I might be out of the league. I was like, I'm going to enjoy every part of it. So I'm pregame, I'm looking at everything. And one of the things I started doing during the national anthem, I'd find 3 seats and I'd just close my eyes and talk to my grandmother and my 2 grandfathers. And just meditate on the lessons that they taught me. And my grandfather fought in the war. I remember him always teaching me courage, essentially. Let me have his courage. Let me have my mother's father's wisdom. He used to always just kind of sit while he's the one that's sitting in the corner with his legs crossed while the house is in chaos. It just, always thinking. And then I wanted my grandmother's fight, because we learned really early in the book, she forces me back outside to go fight a bully. And that's where I get my fight from, is my grandmother. And so I would just meditate on those. And so the national anthem actually became a very special moment for me because I had never really contemplated those things. It became a pregame ritual, my last kind of affirmation right before I hit the field.
And then you discussed Christianity as well and how you became a Christian at Ohio State. And there's a connection between Christianity and football. So what is that connection there for you? Yeah,
I put it in a process because I'm no longer a practicing Christian, but I put it in a chapter called Process because going through, the getting pressed through the entity of religion is a bit of a process. And I didn't know how intertwined football and religion were. It was like, okay, you walk into the locker room, before you go out into the game, you say the Lord's Prayer. When you go out onto the field, players run down the field, take a knee on the end zone, they pray. Then you come back in the game, the game's over, first thing you do, you pray. Come back in the locker room, you pray. I'm like, this is the football stadium's a church at this time. Like, then they had the pastors come in. And so I would talk about how being a black kid from New Jersey who didn't really grow up in the church, being dropped into a very white Ohio, that's very Christian, and being up on stages like this, giving testimony to an all-white congregation, and just how difficult that was to navigate. At one point you feel like you're doing the right thing, but something is just very off. But it does keep you in a place where it got to the point where I felt like, if I was on campus with too many girls, then like my shame is why I wasn't playing bad. Like I was really like into it. And it wasn't until maybe I talk about a friend kind of guides me now to this black portion of campus that I hadn't been exposed to as an athlete, because we don't really do much campus activity. And I go to a probate, and that's when I learn about the Divine Nine and Omega Psi Phi. And then I end up at a black church, and I just, it's one of those things where, I went and nobody cared that I was there. I'm like, oh, this is great. And so I just paint the picture of, like, as an athlete, the world that we're in. Like, we see, everybody's excited. Malcolm Jenkins is going to Ohio State. Oh, this is great. But it's also like, all right, now you're plucked out of your world and put into a new place that you really got to function, and trying to keep who you are, the essence of who you are in this environment. You're going through mental conditioning. And I put that in process to really just kind of lay that out, the world that evolves around athletes, how it kind of pushes you to the same narrative. And so when you see athletes at the podium and all of them have the same first line, I'd like to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, like, it's on repeat, because that's the process that we go through college athletics.
So let's get into going from, you were playing high school, you played for college, Ohio State, and then you're in the NFL. You are selected and making money, and first in your family making some serious cash. How was that, you being set apart? How did your family and the peers that you grew up with see you differently? What responsibilities were they putting on you? Because you had money and we might not. And then how does that take a toll on you?
I think it comes differently. I think a lot of us, like, I think my family was one of them that we saw the 30 for 30 broke, like, and I'm sure my parents looked at it like, oh, that's not going to be us. We're not going to be the family that takes all the money or that's asking you for everything. That's not going to be us. But then life happens. Like, my mom gets fired because she comes to go to a game and she's supposed to be at work. Okay, well, now that income is gone. So regardless of what our plan is, that's the thing. Then life happens again. My dad gets fired. And so there's that expense. And then you've got a brother, you've got cousins, you've got things, and life is happening for everybody. And really quickly, we all forget about the plan that we had in the beginning. And every athlete is in that, but that's really for everyone who is the first one in their family to get some money or the first one to go to college. There are these pressures and things that you're navigating that no one else has ever had, that no one's been down. And so you're often doing this, you're almost flying blind. And you're just going off your gut and instincts, which is very little, and they can't see what you see. And so I talk about, there being almost like, they talk about like a survivor's guilt, but it wasn't like a guilt. It was more of an anxiety. Like, I have to tuck my stuff in when I'm around here. I can't feel good about the things that I've earned. And then that creates a very isolating place, because the only place that I wanted to, or when you get things, you immediately want to share them with the people you're closest with. But you can feel the energy in the room, the jealousy in the room, the people who feel like you are now the solution to their problems, and you withholding the solution is now you're the problem. It's not even the person that they owe the money to, it's you that's the problem, because you could just fix it, but you're not. So now the issue is there, and you feel that tension constantly. And so I just try to paint that picture, in the book, because that's also something that's very near and dear. When you grow up in a village, kind of a tribe mentality, to have the pressures of the tribe on you is a lot.
I could only sympathize with you in that part of the book. I couldn't empathize, and I want to have that problem one day. Let's get in the NFL. So I'm going to make an assumption because where we are, that Philly is your favorite place to ever play football ever, right? Okay.
That would be correct.
So what's your second favorite?
Honestly, I think back home in Piscataway was probably that's where I loved the game probably most genuine. Mm-hmm. I had no expectations for sports. I just played it because I loved playing it, and I was obviously good at it. But I wasn't a kid who was like, oh, are the scouts in the stands or where am I going to send my tape? I didn't care. I just wanted to play. And now I didn't, obviously once I left Piscataway, there are more things at stake than just the game. And that only grows as you go. So I think about, obviously winning Super Bowls and playing in the league, but I also miss just, 2020 was like that for me. When there were no fans, you had to really figure out if you loved the game. It's like, oh yeah, you don't have 100,000 people cheering you on now. Do you really love the game or are you just a showboat, and you're just playing with quietness, and it feels like a practice, and all you can hear are the sounds of the game. That was like refreshing for me as a player, and it reminded me of like just being in the yard.
What was the worst city to play in the NFL? They might help you here. I don't know. They might help you here.
Dallas is like, we just go from the hotel to the thing and get out of there. We're not hanging there. I think the worst field was the old Raiders field with the dirt in the middle. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was terrible. That was probably the worst one. I'm glad they changed that one.
All right, and then, all right, so we hate Dallas here. I don't know if you know this. None of us like Dallas. None of us like Dallas. Nobody in the entire world.
You separating me from we don't like Dallas.
And you even talk about that because on page 259, you had the most beautiful quote I've ever seen of any NFL.
We might have to put it on a T-shirt.
What team would you not play for?
Dallas. I told my agent, I was like, I'll retire, man. Like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
You were going to retire before ever going to Dallas?
Yes, for sure.
That's why he is a legend, people. So, we cannot end this conversation without singing one of your favorite songs ever.
Hold on. Can we extend this real quick?
One of your favorite songs? Go ahead. What?
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit more. So there's a thing. There is a narrative, and I was like, I haven't got a chance to talk about it on the tour. That's why I'm kind of excited about it. But there's a narrative in this story as well about like the significance that Black women have played in my role. So you'll see it multiple times. Like in football, we always kind of talk about like the men, the strongness, and I have those examples. But I think what is also standing out to me is my mom is the president of the Malcolm Jenkins Foundation, who is, I tell people, if my dad built the foundation, she built the house. And she's really taken my dreams from like how I want to have impact on the world and grown them exponentially. So we do work in everywhere I call home: Ohio, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, serving thousands of people, and that's really on her back. So as people see me and the impact that we're having, it's an us thing. My manager, India, back there, I talk about her in the book and giving me the lesson in like self-value, how to like understand what you're worth and be able to get up from a negotiation if it's below what your value is. I talk about even financially not knowing what to do and having a best friend who I've known since preschool come in and take over my finances, and eventually we build a portfolio of businesses under the name of Malcolm Inc. That doesn't happen, without her. And we also see in this book where they all deal with health issues, and then I have to be strong for them. And so it's a narrative that I don't like to gloss over, because most of the time you're going to see a strong black man, there's always going to be black women around him. And so, I can't stand here and take that credit without talking about that. Yeah.
Did you want to lead the Eagles fight song?
You got to lead it.
All right. We got to stand for this. This is yeah.
You got to stand for this.
Y'all ready? Fly, Eagles, fly on the road to victory. Fight, Eagles, fight. Score a touchdown, 1, 2, 3. Hit 'em low, hit 'em high, and watch our Eagles fly. Fly, Eagles, fly on the road to victory. E-A-G-L-E-S, Eagles! Malcolm Jenkins! Woo! I'm gonna ask y'all to do me one favor, just grab a seat real quick. Got a few announcements. Malcolm, appreciate you. So we're going to, while Malcolm gets set up, right on over here, you can follow. Come on down these stairs. Oh. Yeah. But the steps are right there. We don't want you to fall, because then, they'd look at me. So, want to tell you, while Malcolm's getting set up, we're going to have books for sale. You can see the books right over here. You are more than welcome to buy Malcolm Jenkins books. They can take cash and they can take card. Malcolm Jenkins will be signing books for you of those books right over there. Also, make sure that you check out the library for other events taking place. And so we happen to have, who's coming? Faith and Kenny Lattimore are going to be here when, Carl?
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday.
Thursday.
All right.
Yes.
And a lot more taking place. So with that, I'm going to direct you over here for the books. And then if you already have your books, then you are allowed to queue up over here for Malcolm. Thank you all.
Right. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. Make sure you check in on social media, Facebook and Instagram, to see what's going on for the next couple of weeks. Thank you.